latest season of Alone in the Wilderness has kicked off with just 8 contestants in the Norwegian forest, the smallest group yet. But this group is the most skilled yet. Their survival abilities and awareness have totally amazed me. The last one standing wins $1 million. Let's dive into day 1. First up is Mad. He doesn't seem very excited to be here. Next is Suni. She arrives wearing a not-so-green hat and starts crying. Maybe she remembered her wife cheating on her? He came here just to change his lifestyle. Winning the $1 million prize could get him 100 wives. Upon landing, he took off his green hat because he's alone here. Finally, he doesn't have to wear it for others to see. But once the excitement wore off, he saw that the wilderness was way scarier than his wife's emotional hit. Animal tracks, likely from a black bear, cover the ground. Next up is Henrik, who finds himself in a rocky area. His spot is mostly rocky. He immediately starts knitting a sweater and seems to enjoy the environment. The rocks on the ground are hard to walk on, but they're better than the durian peels at home. The 4th contestant is Fleming. He's another middle-aged guy in his 40s. Seems like the initial group of contestants are all middle-aged men. This survival area is mostly facing the sea with mountains at the back. Fleming's spot is quite good. Let's see how he performs. The 5th contestant is Henry, whose full name is Henrik, just like Rick. To avoid confusion, the show calls one Henry and the other Rick. They refer to one as Henry and the other as Rick. Henry, like Rick, is a middle-aged man with 2 kids at home. Life is okay, but he joined the show to earn some extra money for his family. Henry usually enjoys outdoor hiking. He is very confident about this survival competition. Among all the contestants, Henry is the only contestant with a personal intro. Is he the show's early favorite? Let's see if he can go the distance and win. Henry's spot isn't as scenic as Fleming's beach, but considering the surroundings, it should be a good place for fishing. The 6th contestant is Rams. At 39, he's already a grandfather. Upon arrival, Rams was thrilled. He looks like a strong contender and even found a stick on the ground. He plans to make a weapon for self-defense. Despite looking like an old man, he's actually in great shape. Rams started exploring with the stick, taking a walk around. This spot is quite nice, and the grass on the ground is soft. Sleeping on the ground should be fine. If he finds food, he might outlast the show's budget. Rams found 2 wooden planks on the beach with some nails in them. These could be very useful. The 7th contestant is Lena. At last, a female contestant. Though she's around the same age as the older men, Lena took in the view and began to cry. When a girl cries, it usually means things are tough. Sometimes, it's just good to have a cry first. Lena's spot is full of big rocks, which should be good for fishing. She got nervous as soon as she arrived and walked into the water to calm down. The 8th contestant is Meta, another middle-aged woman. Any woman who can live alone in the wilderness must have some skills. Her hunting skills may be lacking, but she can endure hunger like a champ. Can't wait to see how Meta does. Rams came back from exploring. He started singing. Is he celebrating his victory early? He really likes this environment. He plans to build a temporary shelter here. There are plenty of sticks around to use. In no time, he set up the framework. His hands-on skills are indeed impressive. He even labeled his water bottle. After a drink, he began constructing the temporary shelter, setting up sticks and covering them with a waterproof sheet. He used stones to secure the edges. He'll make do here for the night. Mad has already set up his temporary shelter. He went to the shore to observe and found the water very shallow. To catch fish, he needs to go deeper with a net. In a flash, he stripped off his clothes. He took the net and went into the water, exuding an irresistible charm. Mad's progress is quite fast. He began net fishing right away. Contestants who prioritize food often succeed. Day 2 dawned. Fleming woke up early. He slept well last night. He decided to try fishing at sea today. Whether he enjoys his time here depends on his catch. He searched for raft materials but only found dry wood on the shore, making shore fishing tough. He needed a plan. Drinking water from the nearby stream was easy, but fishing there wasn't worth it. Fleming explored the area and found an old iron barrel. He wasn't sure why it was there, but he decided to investigate. The barrel looked ancient. He dragged it to the shore to see its potential. After checking it out, he found it mostly intact. Fleming decided to turn the barrel into a raft by securing 2 wooden poles to its sides. Then he tied the barrel and poles together with rope. Although it was a good idea, it seemed difficult to make the barrel support a person. But after trying it out, it worked quite well. He hoped the raft would be useful. Meanwhile, Rams had already woken up early. He went to the shore to sort out his fishing net and caught a small fish. Though it was tiny, it was still food. He continued to pull in the net, but there were no more fish. The net was a tangled mess, likely due to the rough water near the shore. Rams lost his patience over the mess. He sat on the shore sulking. "What's up, man? Why are you sulking? Your wife isn't here, so who are you sulking by now?" Rams had no idea how long he'd be stuck here. It had only been 2 days, and he was already missing his family. He found it tougher than he thought, but chose to stay composed. Fixing the fishing net was crucial. After all, he relied on it for food. After calming down, he went back to the shore to sort out the net again. Henry, meanwhile, was in a dilemma. Being a vegetarian, he didn't eat fish, yet he had brought plenty of fishing gear. Without fishing, he'd soon be starving. Henry was torn about whether to fish or not. The pile of gear in front of him conflicted with his principles. "What would you do?" Henry tossed the fishing net into the fire. "That surprised me, but I'm sure a vegetarian can't survive long in a wilderness survival show." Fleming was organizing his sleeping area. He planned to use the materials to improve his raft. You have to admire the lengths these contestants go to for food. While Fleming was brainstorming ways to get food, Henry was busy burning his fishing net. "I just don't understand these contestants." Soon, Fleming finished his makeshift raft and took his net to go fishing. He slowly paddled out to sea. All this effort, just to catch some fish for dinner. He paddled to deeper waters and cast his net. The raft floated on the sea. Fleming felt like a ship captain, determined to catch fish. Hours later, Mad checked the net. Despite his flashy personality, Mad had no trouble catching fish. He quickly snagged 2 big ones. What a catch for just the second day. Mad was outpacing the others. The fresh fish and big pot of soup would definitely fill him up. Mad whipped up a big pot of fish soup and added some mushrooms. After eating it, a bathroom break was inevitable. Lena also caught a fish. It might not seem like much to us, but to Lena, it was 10 days worth of protein. Lena cleaned her tiny fish by the shore. Who knew a thumb-sized fish could make a whole pot of soup? I was even more amazed that she used a huge iron pot to fry a tiny piece of fish heart. She's definitely got skills. Soon, the fish and fish heart were ready. They tasted pretty good, and the fish was fresh and juicy. As a dame, she even used chopsticks to eat the fish. Impressive skills. After lunch, she explored the surroundings. She then started on a permanent shelter. I was blown away. How are they so strong this season? They hunted and feasted on day 2. They kept working on their shelters, not wanting to waste any time. Mad's fish soup was finally done. Staring at the pot of fish soup, it didn't look too appealing, but survival meant he had to eat it. Even without any seasoning, hunger is the best spice. Meanwhile, Fleming finally set up his fishing net. Fingers crossed for a good catch tomorrow. By day 3, Rick was grilling fish bright and early. The meal was a real treat. This group seems to prioritize food, which is smarter than those who rush to build shelters right away. You need to be well fed to have the energy to work. Rick found a perfect spot for a shelter with rocks as natural barriers. Using a waterproof top would simplify things. Rick noticed a large crack and planned to use it for his shelter. He kept tossing wood into the crack, but after countless tries, it still wouldn't go in. Why not just climb up and place it? If he keeps this up, Rick could get injured in this crack. He also saw the sky looking strange, hinting at heavy rain soon. The weather here is all over the place, switching from sunny to stormy in a flash. Around the lake, you get strong winds and heavy rain. In autumn, temperatures can drop to -10 degrees. In just 3 days, Meta has already built a permanent shelter. Even though it's not finished, you can tell from the structure that this shelter will be solid. I must say, the contestants this season are really impressive. Building a shelter like this in just 3 days is quite impressive. Suni is also working on his shelter, but Suni's going all out with a 5-meter tall conical shelter. Meanwhile, Henry's opted for a trapezoidal design. The wooden frame is done. Now Henry just needs to add a waterproof sheet. As the evening wind picks up, Lena is also working on her conical shelter. Meta must be having the best time right now. Next, she just needs to think about food.
Rick has been struggling.
I wanted to get into this crack, but fortunately, I managed to get into the hole in the end, which made him happy like a successful fee. He intended to drag it with a rope. Soon, a temporary shelter was ready. Once done, Lena returns to the shore to set up the net, but the wind wind was fierce today, making it hard for her to cast the net. She tried multiple times, but just couldn't manage it. In the end, he ditched the rocks. Maybe a long stick would do the trick. If he could attach the net to the stick, he might lay it out horizontally in the water. After a lot of hard work, I finally got the net set up right. As night fell, Lena still struggled to adjust to the evenings here. She only caught a small fish on the second day, leaving her hungry and exhausted. The lack of food made it even harder for her to sleep. He's exhausted, but can't fall asleep. Mad hasn't eaten since his full meal on day 2. At night, hunger keeps him awake. His unfinished shelter and the tent make proper rest impossible. Lena woke up early and sat by the shore, her mind fixated on fish. She felt nauseous last night and even threw up. Maybe she's still getting used to the place. She brewed some hot tea, drank it, and then retreated to her shelter to sleep. Lee Ji seems to be doing okay, but his shelter is full of holes. He really needs to improve it. Whenever it rains, the shelter gets incredibly noisy. The weather's been getting worse lately, and a storm is on the way. Rams lives by the shore, and weather changes affect him the most. His shelter is about to be blown away, and only now does he think of moving, but it's already late. The sun is nearly down, but he decides to take apart his shelter and move. Rams finds a somewhat better spot. His comfort tonight is up to chance. Meanwhile, Met has perfected his shelter, filling gaps with moss. He even has a grilled fish to enjoy. Mad, on the other hand, has moved his stuff into his new shelter. Although it looks a bit like a doghouse, it's more comfortable than a temporary tent. With the wind picking up, it seems a big fish might come soon. On the other hand, Lena decides that if she can't catch any fish by tomorrow, she'll go home. This season's contestants are quite decisive. If they can't catch fish, there's no point in starving. Going home is better. It's better than leaving just because they miss home. That night, Mad feels sick after eating mushroom stew. He vows never to eat mushroom soup again.
What surprises will the contestants bring next?
Stay tuned for the next video update. The latest season of Alone in the Wilderness has started. One morning, a contestant excitedly pulls up his net to find 3 large salmon, enough to last for days. Some contestants risk their lives fishing, making it a mix of joy and sorrow. On the 4th day, Suni wakes up early and puts on his sweater. The autumn morning is just over 10 degrees. He enjoys the scenery and plans to work on his shelter. Sleeping like this every night is freezing. Before working on his shelter, he heads to the shore to check his fishing net, hoping for a catch. Suni's luck is great today. His net is full of salmon, one after another being pulled ashore. Undoubtedly, he is the big winner today, catching 3 large salmon. One fish can last him 2 days. These 3 fish will last him at least 8 days. Suni's family loves fishing, and his wilderness skills are centered around it. Before coming to the challenge, Suni's mom prepared a special piece of gear for him. To an ordinary person, it looks like a warm sweater, but to Suni, it has magical properties. When you feel cold, wearing it makes you much warmer. Suni starts building his shelter. I thought he would build a permanent one, but he only set up a tent. Without food at night, he'll be shivering in the northwest wind. Now it's the 5th day. Fleming wakes up and notes it's the 5th day. Despite his decent shelter, he hasn't been sleeping well. The rocky ground leaves him sore and uncomfortable after sleeping. He then heads to the shore to check his fishing setup. Luckily, he catches an eel. Though it's not big, at least he won't go to bed hungry. Fleming brings the eel back for breakfast. Rick wakes up and heads to the bathroom, recalling his most painful night. Upon waking, he feels reluctant to move, as if his back isn't his own. On the 1st day, he used many pine branches under his sleeping mat. It was comfortable to sleep on. On the 4th day, he did the same, but didn't sleep well. He heads to the shore to check his fishing net, but falls hard while pulling it up. Rick's physical condition is poor. Hunger is severely affecting him. He didn't catch any fish and almost got hurt. He guesses the lack of fish is due to the risky spot. He urgently needs a deeper spot to catch fish. From the mountain, he can see the water depths clearly, and the shallow areas near the shore are quite extensive. Brother Lee continued his search for a good fishing spot. The water was dark, and it reminded him of his earlier fall. He didn't think he'd fall again here. It's like bad luck invited more bad luck, falling twice in one day. Fortunately, I avoided falling into the water. I got up and kept exploring, feeling like I'm risking my life. Lena aims to catch fish today. Yesterday, he said if he couldn't catch any fish, he would quit the competition. He went to the shore to check his net, and it was already halfway pulled in. The more he pulled, the more his disappointment grew. But at last, he caught a fish, reigniting his hope for survival. Lena lives by the sea and goes out every day with her dog. After catching a fish, she returns to her shelter and starts a fire to cook it. While the fish cooks, she arranges her net for the next catch. Soon, a big pot of fish soup is ready. After 5 days of hunger, finally having a big meal felt incredibly lucky. Some contestants go 10 or 20 days before their first meal. Eating after 5 days feels like winning the lottery. As others have breakfast, Meta is just waking up to brush her teeth. Even without toothpaste, she brushes her teeth gracefully. Despite the strong wind last night, her shelter held up, allowing Meta to sleep well. All thanks to her self-built shelter, which has a wooden base and a waterproof fabric roof. Inside, a bed of pine branches adds to the cozy feel. Meanwhile, Fleming went fishing early and caught 3 big fish. Today, he caught 3 big fish. He doesn't eat the innards, but they won't go to waste. They can be used as bait to catch more fish. Fleming dug a hole by the shore and buried the fish innards, marking the spot. There's a small stream near his shelter. He has more fish than he can eat right away. The water is as cold as a home refrigerator, around 7 or 8 degrees. Fleming decides to store the eel he caught in the water, hoping animals won't take it. After waking up, Rick made a pot of berry soup for breakfast, but it tasted bad. It needed sugar. He wasn't happy with it. He craved fish instead. Meanwhile, Fleming was having a great time. He grilled a big pot of fish, with plenty more still cooking. Doesn't he know how to smoke fish to make it last? Eating it all at once isn't smart. But Fleming doesn't care about that. He just cooks all the fish in one go, enjoying a feast. Lena just has tea in the morning. She caught 2 fish yesterday and has 1 left, but she still can't get used to the fishy taste. Maybe she should wait until she's hungrier to eat. Penny, exhausted and planless, sits there early in the morning. After days without food, she's exhausted from working. She seems like a rookie. It's now the 6th day. Meta survives on berries every day. She has a good shelter now, so she can focus on catching fish. The water near the shore is very shallow. Meta plans to build a platform to reach deeper waters. After setting up a tripod, she lays 2 wooden sticks on the rocks, letting her walk a bit further to cast her net. It may seem pointless, but it doesn't really help. While others catch fish, Henry keeps working on his shelter. Every season, there's always someone who spends all their time on their shelter. Fortunately, his shelter is quite decent. Today's smoke ventilation system upgrade works well, but such a shelter is easily flammable. After a hearty meal on the 2nd day, Mard focuses on building his shelter. His shelter can even fan out like a peacock. I've never seen a shelter so mobile. Suni checks his net at the shore, but it might be too shallow. He only catches a small fish, barely enough for 1 meal, but it's still a hope for survival. Rick is fed up with the rocky ground, so he upgrades his shelter by making a waterproof hammock. The hammock instantly adds a touch of luxury. Rick lies in it, frequently adjusting his position. Though it's not very stable, it's better than sleeping on rocks. Suni starts cooking the fish. As someone from a fishing family, catching just a small fish today feels humiliating. Worse, he accidentally throws away the fish head while preparing it. Skipping parts of the fish isn't noble, it's just bad cooking. Meta waits for fish to get caught in the net. After days of surviving on berries, he's feeling increasingly tired. Meta needs to eat meat to keep up with all the work. The platform he built today is his best chance to catch fish, which is now the main survival food for everyone. Is it really impossible to hunt other food if they can't catch fish? Soon, Meta starts missing his family. Indeed, people can't stay idle. Meta's main drive is her family, though the $1 million prize is the real reason she joined. After a hearty meal, Suni relaxed by the shore, taking in the view. He seemed idle, just sitting there. These foreigners, when they're not hungry, almost never consider fishing, much like their tendency not to save money. Meanwhile, Lena used yesterday's fish innards as bait. After 6 and she's caught 3 fish. Now, the weather is getting colder, and the fish prefer to hide in deeper waters. Sometimes, she waits all day without catching a single fish. Lena's daily protein intake is insufficient for her energy needs, leaving her feeling drained. She questions her ability to endure hunger and considers quitting each time she fails to catch fish. She thinks about quitting. On the 7th day, it started raining heavily. The weather became very wet and cold. Rick's shelter was soaked, drenching the fish he was grilling. The inside was completely wet, with rainwater pouring in. The shelter's roof was saturated with water. The rocks behind him dripped water non-stop, leaving no dry spot in the shelter. Rick's shelter, though it offered some rain cover, offered no comfort at all. He even took down the waterproof tarp in the rain, choosing to move at this time. I really can't understand the contestants' actions sometimes. He went into the jungle to find a suitable spot, perhaps hoping to use the leaves to shield from the rain. But taking down the shelter in the rain seems unnecessary. On the surface, Rick's actions seemed foolish. In reality, they were downright stupid. He chose a spot and put up the waterproof top once more. Meanwhile, Fleming was quite content with his shelter, remaining dry despite the heavy rain. Instead, he stepped outside to relish the rain. A stream near his shelter made fetching water easy, a major advantage. He stored some fish in a water bag in the stream and used a metal pot as a rain gauge. However, Meta was the most comfortable. She lay in her shelter, very cozy. Meta's shelter had a double waterproof structure. Inside, she could only hear the sound of raindrops. When building the shelter, she had considered its rainproof structure. It was simply a perfect shelter. Meta checked her fishing net at the shore, finding it clogged with branches and no fish. She spent all her time cleaning it. Meanwhile, Mard, he put on his raincoat and prepared to go out. The roof of his shelter had collected a lot of rainwater. He directly used it as drinking water. Rams came to the shore to drink the northwest wind. The mountain stream kept flowing out. He really felt like diving in and ending it all. Henry wasn't spared by the rain either. Water pooled around his shelter, and it was becoming untenable. The inside of the shelter was already starting to flood. Everyone except Meta was affected by the rain. Fleming also began modifying his shelter. He needed to stop water from entering, so he expanded the rainproof area and added drainage grooves. This kept rainwater out of the shelter. Rick finished building it, but felt it wasn't perfect. The only positive was the soft ground. If the rain persisted, Rick would quit. Lena also felt unwell. She threw up all the water she drank and felt sick. She went to the shore to check her net and noticed something caught in it. She needed this fish to regain her strength, but when she pulled up the net, she saw it wasn't a fish. She cursed at the net. Perhaps her weakness was affecting her perception, making her think everything was a fish. Suni was lazing in her shelter. As long as it rained, she couldn't go out. She just dreamt of catching 5 big fish. It seemed like all the contestants were fixated on fish. Was she dreaming or hallucinating? Upon waking, she hurried to check her net. Otherwise, she risked malnutrition and collapse. At the shore, she found a dire situation and tried to pull up the net. It seemed like the net was stuck, and eventually, the rope broke. Suni lost not only the fish, but also her essential fishing tool. Now it was even harder. Without the net, how would she get protein? Soon, the show's boat appeared. Who was going to quit? It was Lena. She was so hungry, she started hallucinating. She had left the net out for days without catching any fish and was starving. After just 7 days, she decided to quit the competition. Lena was the first to quit because she couldn't catch fish. Meanwhile, Rick made another hammock in his shelter. This solved his problem with the dampness. Such a leisurely shelter, I had never seen before. Suni went into the water to retrieve her net, but came back with just the rope. What surprises will the contestants bring us next? Stay tuned for the next episode. The Wilderness Survival Show has started with new gear. Marder constructs a cozy wooden shelter and roasts extra fish on the fire. A smoked fish and some berries make up his most sumptuous lunch today. It's now the 7th day. There are still 7 contestants left. It's been raining frequently lately. Even with a raincoat, Marder gets soaked. Being wet every day is not a solution. Marder's thick clothes are already soaked. He jokes that he should have brought a washing machine. He repurposes the waterproof fabric from his shelter. He turns it into a skirt. To an ordinary person, it's just a skirt, but to a survivalist, it's a waterproof skirt. Thanks to the skirt, he doesn't have to worry about wet pants anymore. It's still early, so Marder plans to fish and build a raft to reach deeper waters. To reach deeper waters for fishing, he needs a raft. Meanwhile, Rams has significantly expanded his shelter and can now stand up inside. No more lying down constantly, especially when it rains. Upgrading the shelter was crucial, and Rams is thrilled with the improvements. Henry, however, isn't very engaging. He's too lazy to improve his shelter. A minimalist, he burned his fishing net from the get-go. He spends his days eating berries and sleeping. Fleming, bored in his shelter, takes out a photo of his wife to pass the time. He wants to hang his wife's photo in the shelter to feel like she's sharing the wilderness experience. Family photos are a hidden trap in wilderness survival. Looking at them stirs up endless longing for home. This usually makes contestants quit sooner. Meanwhile, Marder plans his raft, starting with a wooden ring. Then he makes another ring, weaving branches in and out. The raft needs to be a good size, but it can't be too heavy, and it must work. Not sure if everyone understood, but I listened for 2 hours. I still have no clue what he meant. Eventually, he stopped explaining and began building, gathering lots of fir branches. Let's hope he makes a good raft. It's now the 8th day, and it has been raining for several days. Rams lives by the damp shore. His shelter is full of hanging socks and underwear, and almost everything inside is wet. The rain has made survival even harder. On the 7th day, Rams noticed water seeping into his shelter. The fire pit was also filled with water, forcing him to find a new place to build a shelter. He found a higher ground nearby. Here, he shouldn't have to worry about flooding. After choosing the spot, he started building the shelter. Building a shelter alone is really tough. But Rams faced many challenges. He set up a tripod, covered it with waterproof fabric, and finished the shelter in a day. His sweater was quite damp and uncomfortable, but it kept him warm. Rams likely had the best mindset of all the contestants. He even made a friend, a stick that looked like a dinosaur. He named it Renee, which he found on the beach yesterday. The relentless rain had been falling for days, impacting nearly all the contestants. Rick was anxious about the rising water levels. His shelter was already flooded, leaving him to sit inside, staring blankly. With no food or phone, it was even more unbearable. Ever since the rain began, Rick had been contemplating quitting. The constant dampness was unbearable. Sunny was still lounging in the morning, with waterfalls forming around his shelter. His bed consisted of a waterproof sheet and a sleeping mat. On the 7th day, Sunny's fishing net got stuck at the bottom. When he pulled hard, the rope snapped. After the rain stopped, he decided to search for the fishing net once the rain stopped. When the sun came out, Sunny took the opportunity to look for the wet and weak net. The lake water was freezing cold. He fumbled around underwater, turning into an ice pop, but still couldn't find the net. He returned to the shelter, unable to figure out where the net had gone. Even with a sweater on, he was shivering from the cold. Without the net, how would he catch fish and avoid hunger? He chose to use the second net for hunting. If he lost this net too, it would mean he couldn't survive here. Sunny took the new net to the water and continued fishing, hoping for a good catch. Marder was still building a raft. He wanted to reach deeper waters to catch fish. Building a raft was time-consuming, but if it could bring him more fish, it would be worth it. Marder built the raft with fir branches, added waterproof fabric underneath, and secured it with a cross structure. The raft looked like a bird's nest, but who knows how well it would work. Marder was quite handy. He was likely one of the most food-driven contestants. By the second day, he had already caught plenty of fish. This guy knew his stuff, but sometimes he seemed a bit off, preferring to sit in the shelter and sleep. Rick kept griping about the environment. The shelter's flooded, and he wants to boil water, but the wood's soaked. He's unsure if the cut wood will even burn. He plans to build a vertical fire pit by standing 3 logs upright. This is a common fire building method in wilderness survival. It efficiently burns wood. He eagerly cuts wood shavings for kindling, keen to get the fire started. Using a fire starter and wood shavings, he quickly gets the fire going. This type of fire burns efficiently. It can withstand rain, making it ideal for damp areas. The fire burns gradually from top to bottom. Sunny's fire pit is at his shelter's entrance, framed by wood. This design doesn't protect or block light. It's simply impractical. On the 9th day, Marder headed to the shore early to work on his raft. The raft was quite unwieldy, but with his persistent effort, it slowly came together. Once it was finally done, he felt immense happiness. He plans to use this raft to catch more fish. Marder named the raft Gertrude. It will be Marder's new companion in the wilderness. Hopefully, it will bring him good luck. Mate woke up feeling a noticeable drop in temperature. The temperature is dropping, so Mate plans to stuff moss into the gaps of his shelter for better insulation. Don't overlook these gaps. Strong winds can turn them into life-threatening hazards. Mate's shelter is also flooded. She laid a layer of cedar branches on the ground. This carpet looks very nice. Mate is the first contestant I've seen to lay a carpet in their shelter. Rick's shelter, on the other hand, is leaking badly. He even used a coffin board as a carpet. Rick's shelter is worse than a pigsty, with stagnant water pooling at the entrance. Rick opted to revamp his shelter, laying sticks inside. Why not just relocate? Having watched countless survival shows, Rick is the first to build an aerial hammock. Meanwhile, Marder is ready to test his raft's buoyancy. Sitting on it, he finds no major issues. The raft's success excites Marder. This achievement means he can avoid the tough fishing conditions on the shore. Regardless of his catch, the raft offers Marder renewed hope for survival. On the 10th day, Ram's shelter was very well improved, mainly windproof and waterproof. On the 8th day, he caught a huge fish, enough to last him several days. But today, when he checked his net, he wasn't so lucky and caught nothing. Sitting in his shelter, he regretted eating the big fish all at once. If he had rationed it, he could have stretched it out for a few more days. Reflecting in his shelter, he resolved a better plan for his next catch, savoring it like ice cream and smoking the leftovers. Since he wasn't sure if he'd catch another fish the next day, he knew storing food was crucial for survival, especially given his lack of experience. The continuous rain made the contestants anxious. Mate caught a fish yesterday and wanted to make smoked fish today. He hung the fish over the fire to smoke it, becoming the first to do so. Earlier, Marder had caught 3 fish and ate them all at once, which was pretty wasteful. The shelter had plenty of juniper berries, perfect for smoking fish. Soon, the fish turned golden and looked very appetizing. Fleming went to the shore for a drink and refreshed the water for his eels. With 2 fish and 5 eels in his bag, he had the most food among the contestants. Fleming's way of preserving food was to raise it. He wasn't concerned about running out. He intended to keep the fish in the lake. He drove a wooden stake into the lake bed, and once it was secure, he tied the eel bag to it. This method was the best for raising fish, but it was also the riskiest. I kept expecting the fish bag to disappear one day. Sonny went to check his net and had another big catch today. He caught a large turtle fish, weighing about 5 or 6 pounds. If he rationed it, the fish could last him 4 days, the head and tail for 1 day, and 2 pieces of meat for the rest. After every net check, he had to reorganize everything, which was a real hassle. Marder's shelter was well built. Now, he turned his attention to fishing. He measured the net on the shore, but when he flipped the raft, the waterproof fabric snagged on a branch and ripped. Since the tear was low, water would seep in when he used it. The raft was useless before it even hit the water. Even worse, Marder didn't know how to patch the hole. He squatted by the shore, unsure of what to do. Even if he had used it to catch fish once, he wouldn't feel so bad now. He had spent so much time on the raft, and if he couldn't go out to fish, it would all be for nothing. Rams built a stone fireplace in his shelter. He's cooking the fish guts he threw away earlier. When there's food to eat, he discarded the fish heads and guts earlier, but now he's retrieving them to cook and eat. It's a tough lesson in survival. Rams is learning bit by bit. I bet after this, he'll be more resourceful with his fish. Meanwhile, Mate's smoked fish is ready. Smoked fish with vinegar, ginger, and herbs. It's definitely a sumptuous lunch. Mate now has a very good shelter, and now he can enjoy such a lavish meal. It's like heaven on earth. Although Fleming also has plenty of food, he's not as comfortable as Mate. In wilderness survival, the winner isn't the one living in luxury, but the one with the smartest strategy. Fleming's food and shelter are both above average, so he has a good chance of becoming this season's champion. He's taking in the mountain view and admiring the distant rainbow. Meanwhile, Rick is almost always dealing with the rain. He spends most of his time chopping wood. Hey, shouldn't you catch some fish to eat first? Chopping wood every day isn't a solution. His shelter is still just a tent. I suspect Rick is just a filler contestant. Sonny's fire pit is better than his shelter. However, his shelter is as bad as a doghouse. It rains almost every day here. Lighting a fire for warmth is tough. Marder's fire pit, inside his shelter, cooks food and keeps him warm. Marder's raft is leaking, and he's at a loss for solutions. This setback hits him hard. He hasn't caught any fish yet, and it's been raining daily. Without extra waterproof fabric, he's struggling on day 11. Rams checked his fishing net early but only found a small fish. He's beginning to feel hungry. He's shedding pounds daily and is desperate for a bigger catch. But perhaps he hasn't noticed how shallow the water is here. Catching that small fish was already quite lucky. Every time he checks the net, it's a mess. This really tests Ram's temper. As he kept checking the net, he was surprised to find 2 more fish. These would last him at least for more days. Yet, Rams isn't content. He aims to catch more fish. Meanwhile, Rick just sleeps all day. It looks like fishing isn't his priority. He starts a new fire daily, but I can't figure out why he keeps doing that. It's not like he's cooking food or keeping warm, just wasting time on useless things. Marder decided to reorganize the waterproof fabric of the raft. He's figuring out how to fix the gaps, knowing the raft can't be built until the waterproof fabric is repaired. In his spare time, he gathers firewood. He arranges the firewood around the shelter for easy access. It's definitely more convenient. Haven't seen Henry in days. This guy is a vegetarian. He doesn't go fishing every day, just sleeps in the shelter. Such a survivalist. He's really not that interesting. Meanwhile, Rams is stuck organizing the fishing nets, a task he finds annoying but necessary for getting food. Despite the annoyance, he has no choice. What surprises await us from the participants? Looking forward to the next video update. The new season of Living Alone in the Wilderness is here. One contestant is hauling in fish non-stop after spending 5 days building a raft. After hauling in loads of fish, he discovered the joy of living. Some contestants even grill fish daily. Fancy joining this wilderness survival challenge? It's day 12, and 7 contestants are still in the game. Sue and I woke up early, looking a bit dazed. After 12 days, he's still in a tent and hasn't caught any fish, surviving only on wild fruits. After breakfast, he headed to the shore to check his fishing net, his daily priority since it decides if he eats. Luckily, today he had a good catch, a 2-pound salmon. As the net tightened, he caught more and more fish. Sue and I dragged the net back to his shelter and began sorting the fish. He hung it on a tree and realized he had a good haul for the day. These fish would keep him fed for a while. Given the shallow shore, Sue and I was pleased with his haul. If he could get to deeper waters, he'd have grilled fish daily. Sue and I was already considering making a raft. Marder came to the shore early, feeling very frustrated. He used to catch fish every day, but after making the raft, it got a big hole before he could even use it. He felt stuck, like he couldn't fish without it. The main issue was the waterproof fabric. To fish in deeper waters, he had to repair the raft. The raft had a big buckle, so Marder patched it with a band-aid and re-measured the wooden sticks. Each branch was chosen with care since waterproof. On the 13th day, Rams woke up early to find the weather was great, and the lake was very calm. But the weather was awful last night, breaking the devices securing the fishing net. You can picture how violently the net was tossed underwater. The weather shifts quicker than a girlfriend's mood. It's now overcast and freezing, and the fishing net is gone. He needed to get it back, so Rams made a new anchor by tying stones to wood with wire. He prepared to go into the water to place the anchor. The water was so cold it could turn a person into a popsicle. Met started retrieving her net in the morning. She hasn't caught any fish for 3 days straight, and today is no different. Met is clearly feeling the effects of low salt level. She tries to relax as much as possible. If she can't catch fish, her time here will be very limited. Meanwhile, Rams. He successfully places his fishing net in the deep waters, at the farthest point he can reach. It's deep enough there. He believes he can catch more fish. Everyone is worried about getting enough protein, except for Henry, the vegetarian. He spends his days idly chopping wood and boiling water, leaving the area around his shelter nearly bare. Today, he plans to tidy up his shelter to make it look nicer. Then he sits by the shore, lost in thought again. I really don't know what he's doing. Rams is cooking a pot of lunch in his shelter. It looks like plain porridge, but I can't figure out why he'd eat plain porridge. If it's not rice, what is it? Meanwhile, Marder's been gathering branches for a raft. He's so eager to catch more fish that he's losing it. Meanwhile, Rick is busy chopping wood and grilling his catch. A hefty fish can keep him fed for days. Rams can chat to himself endlessly with a Henry, the vegetarian, is bored out of his mind. Meanwhile, Sue Ni is being ridiculous. Everyone's attitudes are shifting. It's now the 14th day. Sue Ni told us some good news this morning. He built a shelter yesterday. It's incredible what a good meal can do. He caught 3 fish yesterday, so he's not worried about running out of energy. He built the shelter in a single day, which is really impressive. It's way better than his old tent. This new shelter not only protects against wind and rain, but is also very sturdy. Sue Ni used a lot of branches. He covered the shelter with them to keep it windproof and warm. The space inside is also very large. There's plenty of space for martial arts or yoga. Adding a wooden bed and a fireplace would make it perfect. As long as he keeps catching fish and gathering berries, he can stay longer. Sue Ni checks his fishing net daily by the shore. Today, the net only caught 1 fish. Although it's not much, it's enough to sustain Sue Ni's energy for the day. Sue Ni realizes that the fish caught in the water are limited, but this net is his last one. He can't afford to lose it. Sue Ni decided to make a raft to go fishing. He had no prior experience, so he made a rectangular frame out of wood. Then he took a waterproof cloth. To my surprise, he wrapped the frame with the cloth, and just like that, the raft was done. Clearly, he was clueless about raft building. Meanwhile, Marder, working in the rain, crafted a refined paddle by wrapping a tree branch with waterproof cloth. It looked very refined. Marder went to the shore and looked at the raft he had spent a week building. He wasn't sure about its buoyancy. Marder put the raft in the water and started testing its flotation. Fortunately, it stayed afloat, showing good buoyancy. As long as it didn't leak, he could paddle to Africa across the Pacific. Next, he thought about dragging the fishing net out. He had set up a pole on the shore earlier. Marder got on the raft and pulled the net out. As the raft moved, the net slowly stretched into deeper waters, reaching about 5 or 6 meters from shore. The water here was deep enough. As long as there weren't any strong winds or waves, the net would hold. It could catch anything, even a shark. Back on shore, Marder looked at the net, pinning tons of hope on it. The bigger the hope, the bigger the disappointment. Sue Ni brought his finished raft to the shore, and it did float. Sue Ni, in just his shorts, tested the raft. As soon as he stood on it, water began flooding in. It was obvious the raft was poorly made. Sue Ni, unwilling to give up, flipped the raft over and tried again. I was genuinely impressed by his determination. Met struggled with her net again, using all her strength, but she couldn't get the net up. She went back to her shelter, set up a waterproof cloth with 3 sticks, and boiled water for a bath. She poured hot water in to cool off, then decided to brave the cold water to retrieve the net. The hot water was for her bath after she got out. Hopefully, she could retrieve the net. Sue Ni always set his net while naked. He walked far out, but it was still shallow. No wonder he couldn't catch any fish. Met finally retrieved her net, but unfortunately, it was tangled and empty. Back at her shelter, she warmed her feet in hot water. Staying warm is key in the wild. If she fell ill, fishing would be the least of her problems. Continuing the challenge would be a problem. Met had a very good shelter, complete with a fireplace for warmth. Even with the constant rain, Met stays pretty cozy in her shelter. Sue Ni figured a raft would keep him dry, but it didn't work out as planned. Unexpectedly, the raft didn't work well. Rams checked his net at the shore and found fish right away. Lucky him. He caught 2 fish today, so at least he won't go hungry tonight. Both nets were catching fish, but the other net only caught 1. However, it was pretty big. He stood on the shore, enjoying the sunset. You can't help but envy his chill vibe. Catching 3 fish today means Rams will be bragging non-stop, and once he starts, it never ends. With his gift of gab, it's a waste he's not live streaming and selling fake liquor. Su and I sat by the shore, deep in thought, while the fish in the pot kept smoking. When you're hungry, you only worry about food. But once you're full, a million other problems pop up. Su and I was pondering his upcoming fishing hurdles. He resolved to get his act together starting tomorrow and reinvent himself. Essentially, he just needed to put in more effort to secure food. He intended to upgrade his shelter today, but spent 5 or 6 hours by the shore. Su and I felt very regretful. That night, the wind started howling again, which would definitely affect fishing. Ram's shelter was still just a tent, with a few branches on top, but it was still quite vulnerable. He stepped out to secure his shelter, placing stones on the waterproof cloth to keep the roof from blowing away during the night. As the wind picked up, he added a few more stones to the shelter. Hopefully, these stones would keep it secure. After securing everything, he rushed back to sleep. On the 15th day, Liku woke up early and found the surroundings quite perilous. He feared the strong wind could snap the trees, which would likely destroy his shelter if they fell. Seeing the big trees swaying in the wind, with the ground moving along, was truly frightening. Additionally, several trees had already been toppled by the wind. One of them was dangerously close to Liku's shelter, and if it fell that way, Liku might die in his sleep. Now, he hoped the wind would stop soon so he could cut down that tree. Only by cutting it down could he ensure his safety in the future. If the wind kept blowing, he wouldn't be able to sleep peacefully. Su and I also went to the shore to check his fishing net. He was very worried about the strong wind last night. As he checked the net, he hoped for a good catch. Sure enough, luck was on his side again. He caught a huge fish in the net, the biggest one he's caught so far. Su and I shouted with excitement. Landing such a big fish would cheer anyone up. This catch would feed him for 5 or 6 days. Looks like Su and I is bouncing back. Despite the tangled net, landing a big fish is promising. This net is all he's got for fishing. No matter how tangled it is, he has to fix it. Now there's a big hole in the net, making Su and I anxious again. Even worse, he's nearly out of fishing line and will run out in a week. Without it, he can't use the net to fish. The more the net gets damaged, the less likely Su and I is to catch fish. He's stumped. Meanwhile, Ram's shelter puffed up like a balloon. Setting up a tent on the shore is like trying to poop in front of a fan. It's a mess. Rams began reinforcing his shelter. He added a wooden structure outside, probably to build a windbreak. He might as well just lay branches on the top. Soon, the windbreak was done, just needing branches on top. Rams preferred building a massive windbreak over improving the shelter itself. I don't get it. And even the camera seems confused. He headed to the shore to feel the cold wind. It was strong, gusting through the forest to the shelter. He had no idea how long it would keep up. The big, shaky tree near the shelter is the main concern now. He won't dare lie down inside until it's cleared. The strong wind affected all the contestants. They couldn't fish anymore. The nets were full of leaves, and the rafts were filled with water. In this weather, fishing was impossible. Suddenly, the show's boat appeared again. Which contestant is quitting this time? Is it really Su and I? He just caught a 70-pound fish. Why is he suddenly quitting? He's quitting because of his anxiety. Without fishing line, he's scared he won't catch any more fish. So he chose to quit. He values the fishing line so much that without it, he feels he can't fish. I've never seen a reason like this before. His exit is the most surprising. He had a decent shelter, and he was catching fish regularly. Yet his anxiety led him to quit. How can a grown man be so mentally fragile? Had a great catch today. His fishing net caught a lot of big fish. He caught 8 fish, several of which were quite large. He cooked the fish over an open flame. Feast was incredibly satisfying. Liku started chopping down the big trees around his shelter. The tree was huge, making it difficult to cut down. He sawed at it for half a day without much progress. 3 hours later, he finally managed to bring the tree down. This meant he was temporarily safe, and he could finally relax. Tonight, he can get a good night's sleep. It's now day 16, and there are 6 contestants left. The weather is great today. Liku woke up early to enjoy the view. After 2 days of strong winds, he was really enjoying the sunshine. Liku stood by the water with his iron pot for hours. Meanwhile, Fleming has been upgrading his shelter. From a tent, it's now a small wooden house. It still looks basic, but it's getting sturdier with each upgrade. Fleming is probably the second contestant after Mate to have a wooden shelter. Marder's shelter is relatively simple. It's mainly constructed from waterproof fabric, which Marder has utilized expertly, resulting in an excellent drainage system. The small hill around his shelter effectively blocks strong winds. Mate, on the other hand, hasn't caught any fish with his net. He tried fishing with a line. Mate hasn't eaten fish in 5 days and might have to quit if this keeps up. He spent hours fishing today, but still had no luck. He plans to forage in the jungle for other food. Currently, he's surviving solely on berries. He plans to collect more berries. Henry, a raw food enthusiast, mainly eats berries. He comes here every day to collect berries. A raw food enthusiast surviving in the wild, I really want to know if he can last till the end. Henry winning would really annoy the fishing contestants. Since it's not winter, there are still lots of berries around, so Henry is safe for now. What surprises await us next? Looking forward to the next episode. Survival experts have transformed their wilderness skills into a fishing contest, building rafts and using nets to haul in hundreds of pounds of fish. After eating so much fish, needing the bathroom is inevitable. Some experts even built rafts from iron barrels and fished until their hands were sore. They ate so much fish they were stuffed. The survival experts turned wilderness survival into a fishing competition. Whoever catches the most fish can last the longest. The winner gets $1 million prize. By the 18th day, 6 contestants remain. Liku wakes up feeling extremely cold. His hands are so cold they can barely function. His shelter is terrible. Just a waterproof cloth for cover and a hammock made of the same material for a bed. Sleeping in it at night makes his back feel very cold, and the shelter doesn't keep him warm at all. If Liku's shelter can last through winter, I'll eat it raw. On the 16th day, he found a bundle of steel wires by the shore. Today, he plans to use these wires to improve his shelter. He wants to tie the waterproof cloth and wood together. He plans to build a windbreak wall at one end of the shelter, using pine branches hung on the steel wires. This method is pretty good, but he could have built a frame with wood and surrounded the bed with branches. This would keep the wind off his head while he sleeps, offering some relief, but it's still not enough to survive the winter. Ram slept well last night because he caught 3 big fish. Today, he needs to clean his pot, so he takes it to the lake with a big brush. He begins scrubbing the pot by the shore, unaware that his gloves have slipped off. Fortunately, he finds them quickly, but getting them wet infuriates him. After all, gloves are crucial for staying warm while working. With them wet, his hands will freeze on the job. Rams keeps complaining by the shore. He could have spent that time drying his gloves by the fire. It's obvious Rams is very upset. Marder wakes up feeling much colder and puts on a full set of clothes. He's still on the ground, so he plans to make a bed for insulation. Marder gathers pine branches by the shore. He probably wants to use the pine branches as a mattress. Marder doesn't worry about food and drink and is living quite comfortably. He lays the pine branches on the ground in his shelter and puts his sleeping mat on top, making it much more comfortable to sleep. But why doesn't he make his shelter more sealed? Henry has been improving his shelter recently. His shelter is quite well made. It has plenty of firewood and a wooden bed frame. Though it appears basic, it's certainly cozier than Marder's shelter. Henry consumes around a pound of berries daily. As a fast food lover, Henry finds the berries sufficient. However, his shelter is poorly located, with water seeping in. Luckily, he built a raised floor with a wooden frame. Still, staying here so long might give him rheumatism. Ram's got his gloves wet and now wants to go home. He's been looking at family photos a lot lately and misses his son terribly. He came here to compete for his family, but now he misses them so much that he suddenly starts crying. If he's doing this for his family, why quit just because he misses them? He gazes at his son's photo, unable to calm down for a long time. Anyway, contestants who look at family photos don't fare well. Liku wakes up early to chop wood. Collecting wood is something he does every day. His shelter is also in terrible shape, affected by the rain and constantly flooded. The fire pit, located at his shelter's entrance, gets soaked whenever it rains. Liku once had the most food among the contestants. He kept many eels in a bag but never improved his shelter, spending every day maintaining the fire pit. It seems like his main focus is the fire pit in this whole wilderness. Rams, in his usual fishing outfit, gets ready to catch fish again. He always wears his special fishing outfit. When he gets to the shore, he sees the wooden anchor he set up has drifted back. This isn't looking good. The net came up empty and the stone anchor is gone. Each time he sets an anchor, he has to wade into the water. With the temperature now twice as cold, he dreads going into the water. And as the weather worsens, and the fish are in deeper water, he needs to reconsider his food sources. It's now the 19th day. Henry wakes up early, eats a couple of berries before heading out. After years of eating fast food, his body has adapted to this diet. If he skips berry picking, he has nothing to do all day, and boredom quickly turns into anxiety. So far, Henry hasn't begun to miss his family. He checks his fish nets at the shore daily, but today, he came up empty again. Now Marder is debating whether to search for food in the jungle or wait for a fishing chance, as climbing the mountain is energy intensive. She plans to climb the mountain in front of her to take a look. After packing her bag, Marta sets off. The trek may be challenging, but finding food will make it worthwhile. The mountain is fairly gentle, and Marta takes her time. At the summit, she spots her shelter. After braving the cold northwest wind, she heads back down the mountain to return home. On her way back, it begins to rain. She reaches her shelter just before the downpour. This hike was fruitless. It seems to rain every day here. Liko's shelter hasn't dried yet, and now it's raining again. The fire he just built today has gone out. He wanted to use the fire to keep warm. Why not move the fire pit closer to the shelter? It's now the 20th day. Rams rises early to inspect his fish net, finding it clogged with debris due to the bad weather. Marta also checks his net by the shore. He uses a raft to place the net in deeper water. This time, he catches another big fish, weighing about 10 pounds. Since using the raft to set the net deeper, Marta has been hauling in fish non-stop, one big catch after another. He now has the most food among the contestants. Today, he caught 7 big fish. With such daily catches, he doesn't need to worry about conserving food. He needs to eat his fill at every meal. Marta has plenty of fish, but Rams hasn't caught any. The cold, shallow water makes fishing tough. Rams, feeling lazy, simply tosses the net with a stone, hoping to catch fish in shallow water. He also tries using a fishing hook. After all, it's his second tool for catching fish. If he doesn't try, he might starve. Even trying doesn't guarantee a catch. This really leaves him starving. It's now the 21st day. Before dawn, Rams is already complaining in his shelter. He's now so hungry that he feels a chill even while sleeping. He desperately needs food to keep his energy up. Rams decides to make a new stone anchor, mainly to secure the fish net. With the anchor, the net won't drift to the shore in deep water. This time, he must give it his all to catch fish, or he might really starve. It's still dark outside. He goes to the shore to check his fish net, but the heavy rain forces him to bring it back to the shelter. He can't sleep at all, just waiting for daylight in the shelter. He hopes to catch a lot of fish this time. After a long wait, it finally gets light. Rams hears the waves at the shore are smaller, which should be good for fishing. His plan today is to wade into the water and cast the net. After putting on his shoes, he heads straight to the shore. The weather is freezing. Rams, clutching a stone, wades into deeper water, about 10 meters out. He drops the stone anchor and carefully pulls out the fishing net. Once it's set up, Rams is shivering from the cold. It rained non-stop, and the creek water flooded into the lake, wiping out the old shoreline. Henry stands at the edge, watching the waves. It feels like the world is ending. Marta's in the same boat. The area in front of his wooden chair is now underwater. The lake's rising water makes fishing impossible in this weather, worsening Marta's situation. Although his shelter is decent, he hasn't had fish for a long time. If it rains for a few more days, the water might flood his shelter. Marta has packed his gear, ready to leave at any moment. If his shelter gets flooded at this critical time, it would be a disaster. Every time the wind blows hard, Liko gets very worried because he lives in the jungle, where most trees are unstable. They can topple easily in strong winds, causing the ground to tremble. Liko stays in his shelter, constantly monitoring the situation. Rams, living by the shore, finds the huge waves terrifying. His fishing net remains in the water. With the storm raging, he doubts he'll catch much, but just hopes the net stays put. Rams curses at the waves, clearly frustrated, while others are shivering from hunger and cold. Marta is taking a bath in the water. The joy of being well-fed is something the hungry can't understand. After his bath, he stands on the shore, enjoying the breeze. He has no worries about food, but isn't he afraid of catching a cold? I've never seen Liko catch fish. In the second season, he raised 5 eels and 2 salmon. Now, he just lies around. The only time he works is for basic survival. It's now the 22nd day. The wind has finally died down. Feeling very cold, Liko quickly starts a fire to warm up. He's growing weary of this life. Looking at his state, he might quit the competition. Liko wanders around his shelter, thinking about his family. Henry's situation isn't much better. The damp surroundings and dropping temperatures are getting to him. Surviving on just plants daily drains his energy, making him feel even colder. Henry is now thinking about quitting. It's the 23rd day. At the moment, only Marta has a daily supply of fish. His shelter is cozy with a fire inside. Meanwhile, hail has begun to fall outside. The weather is dropping rapidly, something no one expected. Today's hail means winter has arrived. All contestants will face even tougher challenges. On the 24th day, Fleming reappears after being off camera for a while. I thought he went on vacation. He also made a raft, but unlike Marta, he couldn't find the right spot to fish. Why can't Fleming catch any fish? It turns out he's been obsessed with fishing lately, but hasn't set up his fish net. No wonder he hasn't caught any fish. Rams checks his net at the shore and, luckily, finds a fish. This time, his hard work paid off. Going to deeper waters really does help. This fish will last Rams 2 days. Back at his shelter, Rams makes a pot of fish soup. He savors every bite, having not eaten fish for several days. He savors it slowly. On the 25th day, Henry wakes up too cold to wear his frozen shoes. His shoes are frozen stiff. He can now clearly feel his muscles atrophying. Out here, he can't eat as well as he does at home, surviving only on berries. How could that be good? Fleming goes out fishing every day. His wooden barrel raft is simple but durable. He always takes the raft out to fish, and today he has a big catch, putting the fish into a bag. Fleming is the only one who can store fish in a bag, so he doesn't worry about them spoiling. His catch today is enormous. Nearly every fish is enough to satisfy him. Fleming heads to the creek to clean them and finds one big fish full of roe. Fish roe is very nutritious, and Fleming eats it raw. Wouldn't it taste better cooked? He fries a pan of fish in his shelter. Today's meal is bound to be filling, but he doesn't know how to store food, eating everything in one go. It's definitely not wise, but with today's big catch, he's likely not worried about future food problems. For now, enjoying the meal is what matters most. At night, Henry can't sleep, thinking about his wife in his shelter. It's clear what's on his mind. On the 27th day, Ram sits by the shore, soaking up the sun. Last night, I enjoyed a great meal and slept soundly. Out of nowhere, the program's boat showed up again. Who's getting eliminated this time? Right now, Henry and Rams are struggling. Unsurprisingly, Henry is the one going home. How can a stoat survive winter on a vegetarian diet? On his first day, he burned the fishing net, ruining his own chances. What surprises will the contestants bring next? Can't wait for the next episode. A new season of Alone in the Wilderness is here, and contestants are facing both paradise and torment. Some have fancy shelters but starve daily. Some live in dirty pits but enjoy beautiful fireworks. Some are so hungry they don't even dare to poop, while others catch so many fish their hands are sore. Vowing to ditch their families and outlast the production team, it's now day 27 with 5 contestants. The weather is great today. Aid started his day with some exercises. He's the most comfortable right now. Even though his shelter isn't the best, Aid eats fish daily. When he's bored of fish, he can pick herbs nearby. The place is full of vinegar ginger grass, enough to last a lifetime. The sun is blazing today, so Mate took his quilt out to dry. I've never seen anyone dry a quilt on a survival show before. Mate's clearly settled into life here. Mate has also made a new net setting device. This fixture works with his raft. He's almost out of fish. It's time to catch some more. Rams is lying in his shelter. He cooked a pot of ginger fruit for breakfast. After breakfast, he donned his waterproof suit and headed to the shore to check his net. He found a big fish, but it was already frozen stiff. This fish is huge, about 10 pounds. It's enough to last him 2 days. The last time he ate fish was 2 days ago. Catching this fish today is a huge surprise. Rams returned to his shelter and started planning his meals. He'll have half the fish for lunch and the rest for dinner, saving the head to make soup for breakfast tomorrow. Lee sits by the fire, drying his feet. It's been raining for days, leaving everything damp. His wet socks are uncomfortable. Whenever he heads out to work, his socks and shoes get soaked. Drying them by the fire helps a lot. Fleming faces the same issue. His socks are so wet you could wring water out of them. It's basically like wearing wet socks. You could pour a cup of tea out of his shoes. Even with soaked shoes and socks, they keep wearing them. Fleming went to the shore to get water and check his shoes waterproofing. Whenever Fleming wades into the water to set the net, his shoes get soaked. He thinks his waterproof shoes are leaking and finds the leak. The solution is easy. Just burn some glue and patch it up. Overall, it's not a big problem. Rams is cooking fish soup in his shelter. Now that the weather is cold, the demand for food is increasing. Even without any seasoning, when you're hungry, a bit of meat tastes delicious. Rams took his cooked fish outside to eat, enjoying the great weather and scenery. Rams sure knows how to savor the moment. While eating, he chatted to himself, claiming today's catch was his biggest ever. He had only seen such fish on TV before. Eating it felt different, and having meat gave him more energy to talk. He felt his mind was sharper too. Even though the fish had no seasoning and tasted quite fishy, Rams still found it delicious. You can picture how starved the contestants are out there. On day 28, Mate was jolted awake by mice in the dead of night. He watched the mice darting around the shelter. Clueless, Mate was so hungry he didn't even dare to poop, and the mice were looking for food in his place. It was like a pipe dream. Mate was very annoyed after being woken up by the mice. He had just dreamt of a feast, only to wake up to an empty stomach. That mouse had no idea it was in danger. When morning arrived, Mate, who couldn't sleep because of the mice, decided to make the mouse pay dearly. She was making a wooden chair, mainly to pass the time. With such good weather, not going fishing and wasting time here seemed crazy. Sitting on this chair made it easier to enjoy the sunshine. Basking in the sun on the stool felt much more comfortable. Mate's thoughts drifted back to family time. Everything was fine except there was no fish to eat. Rams decided to set up 2 nets today. After a big fish meal, he had the energy to work. She chose a new spot for the nets, hoping to catch more fish. This area seemed deep. Rams decided to set the net here. He tied a stone with a rope and threw it into the water. 3 meters was his limit. He hoped this would snag some fish. Rams was now using 2 nets, hoping to snag at least 1 fish. He wasn't very confident, though. He still hoped to catch some fish. Fleming finally fixed his shoes by taping them with duct tape. But he doubted they were waterproof, so he covered them with a fish bag. Why all the hassle? Once prepared, he went to check the nets, but they were empty. Back at the shelter, Rams reflected on how setting the nets was always a hassle. He had to either toss stones from the shore or wade into the water to place them. This way of setting nets seemed tricky. In reality, it's quite complicated. Rick's shelter is a total mess, worse than a pigsty. I think this mink is using the entrance as its bathroom. There's a great environment all around, yet he chooses to live in this muddy swamp. When we evaluate shelters, we usually highlight the best ones. But this time, I have to say, Fleming's shelter is the filthiest ever on Alone in the Wilderness. How much time does it take to move a shelter? He spends time on the fire pit every day. This guy probably builds fire pits for fun at home too. Rick is using wood to build a fire pit in his shelter, aiming for perfection, but it ends up as messy as his shelter. Can you believe his shelter is just a muddy mess? He must have peed on it a lot. Meanwhile, Mate's shelter is gorgeous. Mate's shelter is so nice it even has a fireplace for cooking inside. Ram's place is also great, with lots of firewood to keep warm at night. Fleming's shelter can also cook food. It has a wooden rack on top that can be used to smoke fish. Fleming and Mate eat fish every day. They both have ways to go out and fish, and their catches are quite good. Now, Fleming plans to leave a net out for 2 days before collecting it. This should boost the odds of catching fish with less effort. On the 29th day, Mate is up early, gathering fish by the shore. Of course, the catch is quite ideal. Today, he caught many big fish again. Every day, he gets a lot of fish. Mate is the front runner right now. If he keeps up his current pace and doesn't get homesick after a good meal, he's set. Fleming is full and shaving. He really knows how to enjoy life. Meanwhile, although Mate lives well, he hasn't caught any fish, even though he's been setting nets and fishing non-stop. Not many contestants are lucky enough to eat fish daily. After processing the fish, Mate sits by the shore in a daze. It seems he's not used to suddenly becoming the richest man in the wilderness. What worries me isn't the contestants going hungry, it's their overthinking. Rick heads to the shore, grabs the net, and catches a big fish. This big fish is enough for a full meal. Squeezing the fish hard, he can get a lot of white liquid out. Rick thinks it's the fish's poop. He keeps handling it by the shore, and the fish slips away. Damn, that really cracked me up. This guy is purely here for laughs. It's now the 30th day, and Fleming is at the shore early, facing the northwest wind. Today's northwest wind is freezing. The Fish King hasn't checked the net in 2 days, but he's planning to do it today. Fleming always floats on the water when he checks the nets. If he falls in, it would be quite thrilling. He's caught only small fish twice in a row, which is really disappointing. Fleming is sitting in his shelter, starting to feel anxious. Mate finally had some luck fishing today and caught an eel, but Mate isn't too thrilled. She's not sure if it's safe to eat, but she has to try for survival. This eel is a rare protein source for her. Mate can't stand the eels wriggling. She waits for it to stop moving before touching it, having no experience with eels. This little task took her hours. If it were me, I'd have eaten it already. She chopped the eel into small pieces. She still hasn't decided whether to eat it. Today, Mad plans to build a smoker to preserve any extra fish. He plants wooden poles in the ground and sets a rusty iron plate on top. With a fire below, the simple smoker is ready to smoke the fish. This is probably the simplest smoker I've ever seen. Fleming is now facing a food shortage. He didn't catch any fish today, and his nets are still drying. This means no fish for tomorrow either. The wind and waves are making fishing tougher. Rico's shelter is always flooded. Rico's shelter is a mess, worse than a pigsty. Rams thinks he's doomed without fish, but keeps whining about the eel daily. The pot's already on the boil. Despite what they say, the eel smells better and better. He can't wait any longer. Tonight, Mad is having a feast. He's living the best life right now. Mad has no thoughts of going home. After all, he's eating and living well here. On the 31st day, the show's boat appeared again. Last night, Lee's feet froze stiff, and today he can barely walk. I can't fathom how he survived in that shelter for 30 days. Now, Rick feels like his legs are rubbery, probably numb. Staying in a mud pit every day doesn't help much. Rams isn't doing well either. His old back pain is acting up. Occasionally, he catches a fish, but food supply is the biggest issue. Rick feels his body is in terrible shape, worse than ever before. Now, both Rams and Rick might quit the competition. So, who will it be? Turns out, Rams is the one to quit. He feels extremely hungry and his body can't take it anymore. He's also starting to feel depressed here. He has family waiting for him, so he can't ruin his health here. Even though Rams sometimes caught plenty of fish, he's been starving for ages. It's no wonder his body is giving up. At least he's faring better than those who left due to homesickness. Only 4 contestants remain now. I think Rick might be the next to leave. If Rick wins, it would be another case of luck beating skill. Mate's loving life, fishing, and caring for his horse daily. He's super happy and the current favorite to win. He's even singing on his raft. It's day 32, and Rick is still building bonfires. He's trying to make a tree-shaped bonfire. You'd think he was building a rocket. Each bonfire looks better than his shelter. I really don't get it. How does he manage in that shelter? He just sets up the wood, grabs some charcoal with his gloves, and gets the fire going. He places it under the wood to ignite it, like a wood stove. The fire burns intensely. Rick is skilled at building bonfires. His only joy seems to be building bonfires, purely for aesthetics. It's now day 33. His shelter is always stunning. To pass the time, he tackles one task daily. Next up is making a rain shield for his woodpile. This will keep the wood dry when it rains. Mate's building skills are top-notch. Her wooden shelter is also very well built, but her luck isn't great. She's been hungry for a long time. Fortunately, she's a girl. Berries can keep her going for now. The show's boat showed up again. Rick's quitting. Finally, he's out. His shelter was so dirty, I always wanted to complain. She might be the first contestant ever to live in a mud pit. Lighting bonfires daily won't cut it for survival. After all, it's not just about making fires. Rick's departure was expected, so what surprises will the contestants bring us in the next episode?
Looking forward to the next video update.
This could be the hardest challenge ever on Alone in the Wilderness. The contestants have caught enough big fish, so food and drink aren't a concern anymore. Their shelters are top-notch, but they'd endure 10 days of constipation before quitting. Hunger isn't their worry. The real worry is overeating and losing steam before the $1 million prize. It's day 34 now. Only 3 contestants remain. Mate brushes her teeth at the shelter's entrance on this rainy morning. Sitting at the door, sipping water, and watching the rain is pretty relaxing, though grilled fish would make it perfect. Every morning, the first thing she does is check the fish net. Mate doesn't really expect to catch anything. She probably keeps her expectations low to avoid disappointment. As soon as she lifts the net, she spots a fish. This small catch brightens Mate's entire day, giving her hope for survival. Mate puts the fish in an iron pot to fry. The aroma of the fish fills the entire shelter, making her mouth water. Meanwhile, Mate consistently catches plenty of fish and checks his net daily, always finding a good haul. Sea otters have appeared nearby, stealing fish from his net, but this fish is big enough for Mate to have a good meal. Today, he only caught 3 big fish. If 1 fish can last 2 days, then 3 fish can last 8 days. The fish are full of roe. The fish roe are a wilderness delicacy and taste amazing when cooked. Fleming checks his net every 2 days, but he isn't as lucky as Mate. Luck determines how long he can survive here. Fleming's goal is to last 46 days. As a returning contestant, he previously lasted 45 days, so he has some skills. Now, with 12 days left, he must find food to eat during these days. Otherwise, he won't make it to 46 days. He's been sipping pine needle tea for 2 days now. Doesn't he realize that too much tea can actually make him hungrier? It's now day 35. Mate is acting crazy in his shelter early in the morning. It shows that he's in a very good mental state. After all, he fills up on meat daily. Good food and comfy sleep naturally keep his spirits high. While others have water for breakfast, Mate has a big chunk of meat. The difference is huge. It's been raining for 2 days straight. Food is now the top priority. Without it, you just starve in your shelter. Mate's shelter is solid, but she's the least nourished of the 3. Mate plans to build a fish smoker today, which he started on day 30. He started building it, but hasn't finished yet. As the contestant who catches the most fish, he doesn't smoke them for preservation. It would waste a lot of food. Mate's smoker is basic, held together with wire and heated by a fire below. I just wonder if the wooden frame will burn out before the fish is cooked. Can't wait to see him mess up. Mate is carving her name inside the shelter, clearly bored. Fleming is also killing time in his shelter. Since it's raining, they can't work outside. Everyone's just stuck in their shelters, finding ways to kill time. Only Mate is busy making a smoker. How is Mate so good with a knife? She carved such beautiful letters, I just don't get it. This woman hasn't had meat for days, yet she can still laugh so happily. Fleming's handiwork is also done, and it looks quite refined. Mate hasn't started smoking his fish yet, and now it's raining again. Come on, man. If you don't smoke the fish, what am I supposed to do? Mate goes to the shore to enjoy the view. He notices claw marks on a tree, likely from a large carnivore. It seems risky around here, but wild animals usually leave humans alone unless provoked. As long as you leave them alone, it's pretty safe. It's day 36, and at last, the rain has stopped. Fleming seized the clear morning to check his nets. Despite the hassle, they've been reliably catching fish in the deep water. Despite usually having great success, today Fleming only caught a small fish. Frustrated, he felt like diving in and ending it all. Meanwhile, Mate is finally smoking his fish. Look at those few pounds of fish meat he's holding. He puts the fish heads on the grill's iron mesh. Then he covers them with a rusty iron plate, because only fish smoked on rust gets that special heavy metal flavor. The filthier and more toxic the grilled fish, the tastier it becomes. Put some wood underneath, ignite it, and add small branches to boost the fun of carcinogenic. The grill caught fire. Mate, he just quietly watched the stove burn. What's going on? Is this a success or a failure? Anyway, the pine needles were gone. Who knew if the fish was charcoal? Mate didn't know either. When he pulled out the grilled fish, it turned out okay. At least it wasn't wasted, and he had to eat the grilled fish strips. Meanwhile, Mate began smoking fish again, using his shelter's chimney just like last time. And it came out great. Will he match that success this time? He was boiling water and grilling fish inside the shelter. There were still 2 fish hanging from the roof of the shelter. He planned to hang the remaining fish meat in a bag. Now, he ate half a fish and some berries every day. As long as he had fish, he felt secure. Mate didn't have much meat, but planning meals was beneficial. Fleming was fishing every other day. He wasn't in top shape, but he wasn't doing too badly either. He looked like he could be the winner. If the show had a set outcome, they'd surely add some dramatic twists. Fleming went out again to explore, looking for a better fishing spot. Mate went to the west to get a drink of water. He encountered a bad situation. His nose got injured and bled a lot. Despite eating fish daily, he hadn't had a bowel movement in 10 days, likely due to a lack of vegetables causing constipation. Mate went back to the shore to set up his fishing net. He placed the net on the holder, hoping for a good catch. Meanwhile, Fleming, today, he caught just a small fish but still enjoyed it. He wasn't really hungry, just not quite full. All he could think about was catching more fish. His shelter, a wooden cabin, provided occasional fish meals. He had all the qualities of a champion. He even licked the fish bones clean. When he didn't have fish, Fleming would go out to gather other food. For example, tree bark was also part of his diet. He would collect some, boil them in a pot, and still enjoy eating them. But can he really digest that bark? On day 37, Mate, bored, made a toy in his shelter. He carved a smooth stick, just the right length, and he really liked it. But he felt it wasn't perfect yet. So, he decided to carve some words on the toy. Soon, a delicate toy with a name was finished. To save on data, we'll skip the details. After filling up, Fleming headed to the shore to sunbathe. He worried that rapid weight loss would jeopardize his survival. After expressing this concern, he laid down and quickly fell asleep. Life was pretty comfortable. Mate was even singing in his shelter, despite not having a bowel movement in 10 days. Late at night, Mate wondered how the other contestants were doing. Little did he know, he was actually doing the best. On the morning of day 38, Mate woke up early to check her fish net. The wind and waves were strong last night. She worried the net might have washed away. Reaching the shore, her fear was confirmed. It was gone. Fleming had just returned with his net. He had a huge catch today, landing 9 big fish at once. To have such a haul in the final round, it was an ideal rebound. Fleming intended to cook the fish over a fire. Meanwhile, Mate was struggling, using a stick to scoop water. She found her net, but it was stuck. Despite using all her strength, it wouldn't move. This was her only survival tool. The net snapped. She lost her catch and her net. It felt like bad luck had just walked in uninvited. Back at his shelter, Fleming lit a fire to cook his catch. He aimed for a feast, frying a big pot of fish all at once. It looked like he intended to eat it all in one go. Mate reorganized her net. Although it was only half its original length, she had to make do with it. Even catching one fish would be a good net. On the night of day 39, the wind picked up again. Mate was worried about her net. She went to the shore with a flashlight to retrieve it. Luckily, she caught a fish, which meant she could survive another day. On day 40, all the contestants entered a period of fatigue. Mate's fish supply seemed endless. On day 41, Mate hoped to catch a fish today, and sure enough, she did. This half net worked better than a full net. Just as Mate seemed to be making a comeback, Fleming flaunted his catch. Another hefty fish over 10 pounds. With food and drink sorted, the competition got even tougher. As time passed, the contestants' conditions improved, and they started living more comfortably. The final round of the survival competition felt almost like a vacation. On day 43, Fleming cooked all his fish. Every time he had fish, he would eat until he was stuffed. It seems he smokes the fish to preserve it, but he enjoys the feeling of being full every time. There are still 3 days left until his 46-day goal. No wonder he ate all the fish. Mate pulled out a family photo. She's missing them. Indeed, people can't be too full. It affects their fate. At night, Mate gave himself a foot massage. He hasn't bathed in half a month. I wonder if his feet stink. He suddenly started crying in his shelter. He really misses his family now. Both Maid and Mate are feeling homesick, which is risky. By day 45, the contestants are stuck in a monotonous routine. Who knew that life in the wild could be so monotonous? Mate's longing to return home is intensifying. Meanwhile, Maid works out in his shelter, while Fleming is the only one outside. Mate wants the crew to take her home. After all, announcing his withdrawal is somewhat embarrassing. His goal here was 45 days, and today he has achieved it. He's already prepared to quit in the next 2 days. Seeing the small wooden sticks in his shelter, I can tell Mate has been quite happy here. You can't judge a book by its cover. It depends on whether she wants to show it. Seeing her toy's name a few days ago, I knew Mate wasn't simple. In her shelter, Mate reflects on her experiences. She spent 10 days building this small cabin. Mate was the fastest to build a wooden shelter among all the contestants, and her shelter is the best. She spent most of her early days building, going hungry for over 10 days. She truly is a construction fanatic. She truly earns the title of construction fanatic. Those small wooden pieces, they double as decorations. A woman surviving solo in the wild is always remarkable. She has some unique qualities. Maid sat there for a while. Now she has enough food, but she's starting to get bored and finds this place dull. She once considered ditching her family to stay here until the show went bust, but now she's nervous and just wants to go home. She lay by the shore and cried. At that moment, I didn't know how to comment. Maybe my guess was right. The winner of surviving alone in the wild is never the one with the easiest path. Fleming is in top shape. He wrote names for the shelter, preferring it over idly sitting around. He constantly finds ways to entertain himself, and it's clear his role-playing. This type of person always appears in such situations. Fleming has a high chance of staying until the end. On the 46th day, he reached his target survival days. He could go home and have a feast with his family by pressing a button. Meanwhile, Maida, who had no intention of going home before the 45th day, suddenly wants to leave since yesterday. All contestants are contemplating quitting. It's a test of mental endurance now, as food is not an issue. Anyone who quits now is essentially handing the championship to someone else. Fleming originally planned to quit on the 46th day, but now he feels he really likes it here and doesn't want to leave. On the other hand, Maida, who had never considered quitting, now wants to go home. On the 47th day, the temperature plummeted. It started snowing on the distant mountains, and all contestants noticed. Maida's hands were frozen while fishing, but he still went into the water every day to set the nets. Soon, it started hailing, but no one quit. On the 48th day, Maida's hat was chewed by mice, leaving a big hole. There were 2 mice in his shelter. Maida decided to craft a tool to catch the mice. He used a pipe to make a trap where the mice would crawl in for food, but couldn't escape. He set the trap in a spot frequented by the mice, using a bit of fish meat from the iron pot as bait. He hoped to catch all the mice. Last night, Maida dreamed of eating a lot, probably because he was very hungry. He longed for a proper meal. Despite his hunger, Maida appeared healthy. The mouse trap worked quickly. A mouse was eating right under his nose. He watched it go in and quickly covered the bottle. Soon, he successfully caught a mouse. Maida explained how he caught the mouse, noting it was the second type of meat available in the wild. Instead of eating the mouse, he put it on a large ant nest near the shelter. On the 49th day, Maida continued working every day, but very slowly to conserve energy. He still made wooden toys daily. Meanwhile, Fleming was busy collecting moss and even built a tall fireplace. Rain began again in the middle of the night, and the dropping temperatures made survival tougher for the contestants. Maida was satisfied with his survival journey. These 49 days were enough for him to find closure. What surprises will the contestants bring us next? Stay tuned for the next episode. true difficulty of wilderness survival is astonishing. A 160-pound girl came to survive in the wild for 2 months and ended up weighing just 90 pounds. Her underwear was nearly falling off from how thin she got, but she still caught big fish daily and ate grilled meat regularly. She had so much fish that she couldn't eat it all and even gave the leftovers to the mice. By day 50, only 3 contestants remained, waking up early in the morning. Marder couldn't believe he had made it through 50 days so quickly. With the freezing weather, he boiled some hot water to He couldn't tell if he felt sad or happy inside. Fleming had just woken up. Unsure of the lake's condition, he hoped to fish if it was calm. Wrapped in his blanket, he didn't know how cold it was outside. Mighty was already up checking the fish nets. He hadn't caught anything for 3 days and felt pretty down. He really missed his family. Last night, Mighty couldn't sleep, thinking about changing his child's diaper. He imagined his child small, round, soft-bottomed like a ball and wished he could give it a playful slap, but unfortunately, he was stuck in the wilderness. For now, he pushed the thought aside. In his free moments, Mighty would instinctively grab a piece of wood to carve toys. His mind felt like it was always buzzing, but he didn't want to go back now. He knew he would regret it if he did. Marder went to the shore to check the fish nets. He hoped to catch a few fish, even though he had plenty. It would lift his spirits. Sadly, he came up empty. He decided to set the nets again, while Fleming got ready to collect his. Both were working hard to get more food. Since food was crucial for their survival, they were putting in maximum effort to catch fish. Fortunately, Fleming managed to catch a big one. After setting the fish nets, Marder went back to the shelter for some water. The weather got colder quickly as days went by. The stream began to freeze as winter quickly approached. Mighty felt the chill more each morning. The flowers and grass on the ground were frostbitten, and ice had formed on the shore's puddles. Fleming checked the shore and found his boat stabilizer frozen too. Marder woke up to find his shoes frozen stiff. A chubby mouse came to its doom again, but it seemed Marder didn't notice. He was preoccupied with his shoes. Mighty checked the fish nets at the shore, but found them empty. He lingered there for a bit. He didn't even bother with the nets. The fish had clearly moved to deeper waters as it got colder. Without meat, he was too drained to work, and soaring would felt like torture. Firewood was crucial for keeping warm at night. No matter how tired he was, he had to collect wood to burn. After getting back to the shelter, he nibbled on some stored fish and relaxed on a rock to soak up the sun. It was day 53. Fleming came to the shore daily to sunbathe, enjoying his steady food supply and living the good life. He basked in the sun, savoring his fish breakfast. Once full, he took a nap. He was now in a better spot than Marder. A true underdog story. After resting, he went out on his raft to check his nets and caught another fish. Although the fish weren't plentiful, 1 a day was enough. His raft was much better than Marder's. Surviving on scavenged items, he didn't worry about food or clothing. At the shelter, Fleming looked at a photo of his wife, missing his family deeply. I'm not sure if his family missed him, but he was definitely craving some alone time with his wife. It was now day 54. Marder ate a small amount of fish each day to sustain himself. Those pieces were his daily ration. At the shelter, he began preparing breakfast. Some fish he fried, some he made into soup. Although Marder still looked okay, he wasn't as lively as before. His mindset had clearly changed. Marder realized he was losing weight. Fleming, on the other hand, had fish to eat every day. It looked like the title fight was between him and Marder. Fleming had a better attitude, and since both had food, Fleming's living conditions were more comfortable. Every morning, Marder woke up with cold hands and feet. He found it very dangerous. I was speechless. In such cold weather, wasn't it expected to wake up with cold hands and feet outdoors? He stepped outside and noticed ice forming. They were just waiting for rain. Once it came, snow would blanket the area overnight. Marder's shelter had the worst shelter of the 3. His tent couldn't keep him warm at night, and even with a fire inside, it wasn't as warm as a wooden shelter. At night, Marder started crying again, while Fleming was fixated on catching more fish to keep going. Mighty, meanwhile, depended on her stored food to manage. It was now the 55th day. Snow began to fall from the sky. Fleming woke up early to find everything covered in a layer of snow. The weather was worsening. Marder was shocked by the scene. Everything was turning white as the snow continued to fall. Even without much wind, the show's boat suddenly showed up. Marder was quitting, which really surprised me. As the contestant with the most food, maybe homesickness got to him. It's a shame. I didn't think he had it so easy. Still, it's not surprising he didn't win the championship. After watching so many seasons of Alone, there's never been a champion who lived in a tent. Every champion has 2 things in common. They always have food to eat and a good shelter. Marder's exit is indeed a bit regrettable. Maybe if he had built a wooden shelter earlier, he could have withstood the winter cold. After Marder left, only 2 contestants remained. Fleming kept fishing and seemed to be faring better than Mighty. After all, one is catching fish while the other is eating stored food. Today, Fleming caught another fish. After returning to his shelter, Fleming thought his fishing spot wasn't good anymore since he was catching fewer fish. Still, I think he has a good chance of making it to the end. The cold drains a lot of energy, but Fleming's daily meat intake helps. If he can handle the cold, his odds of lasting here will improve. On the 56th day, Mighty, who used to look like a fresh-faced 18-year-old, had turned into a skinny old lady. I didn't expect Mighty to be this thin. If she loses more weight, her underwear won't fit. She checked her fishing net again and finally caught a big fish. To get a fish at this time, and such a big one weighing over 10 pounds, is incredibly lucky. Mighty, who hadn't had any luck fishing for days, finally caught this big one. It's a real stroke of luck and will last her 4 days. In her darkest hour, she found hope again. She cooked up a tasty pot of berries and fish in her shelter. Meanwhile, Fleming suddenly lost his advantage. He didn't know he was already in the top 2, maybe because he had meat to eat. He wasn't worried since he had a pot of fish in his shelter, but then a mouse climbed in and started eating it. Fleming was furious. Watching the mouse ruin his fish, he debated whether to still eat it. That mouse was unbelievably bold. Fleming had eaten raw fish before, so a mouse didn't faze him. Meanwhile, Mighty was still thrilled about her big catch. Anyway, her confidence was back. The sticks in her shelter, used to count the days, were scratched up beyond recognition. Now, she just wanted to hug her child. The show's boat showed up again for the contestants' medical checkup. Mighty and Fleming both had to undergo weight checks. Both had lost a lot of weight. Aside from being lighter, their physical condition was good. However, Mighty was in a very bad mood. She missed her family terribly. Kuwei Dun mentioned how tough it was out there, and Mighty was likely to be the next contestant to quit. It was now day 58. At night, both were missing their families, wondering who'd crack first. Each extra day boosted their shot at the $1 million prize. When Mighty woke up, she considered her physical state and was conflicted about quitting. The show's boat arrived again. Who would leave? It was Mighty. Sure enough, Mighty's longing for her family got the best of her. She had just caught several pounds of fish, but quit before she could finish eating it because she missed her family. It was such a shame. Mighty was often starving, only catching a fish now and then, unlike Marta and Fleming, who had meat daily. Mighty's life was much harder. Her quitting was expected. If she had beaten Fleming, it would have been quite surprising. Mighty's exit meant Fleming won the championship. On day 59, Fleming caught another big fish. Now he was very bored. On day 60, the show crew came to check on Fleming's health again. It was obvious they were there to tell him he had won. Meanwhile, his family arrived quietly, thrilled about the $1 million prize. Who wouldn't be? When Fleming saw them, he could barely believe his eyes. The win felt so sudden. The moment his wife showed up, sparks flew. Tonight, they were definitely going to celebrate. Fleming, who made a late comeback, worked tirelessly each day to find food. He built a raft at the start and then a wooden shelter. This proved his survival skills. His family brought beer. Wow, that was pure joy. The 3rd season of The Danish Alone has wrapped up. Can't wait for the next season.